The day my world collapsed started as one of the happiest moments of my life. Marcus stood in our kitchen holding a large envelope, his hands trembling, his eyes wet with tears he was trying to hold back. My 17-year-old son, my firstborn, the child I had raised with every ounce of love and sacrifice I possessed, had just been accepted to Howard University. "I got in, Mom," he said, his voice cracking. I actually got in. I crossed the kitchen in 3 steps and wrapped my arms around him, feeling his body shake with emotion against mine. Behind us, Maya and Jordan were screaming with excitement, jumping up and down like they were the ones who had received the acceptance letter. Victor stood by the refrigerator, clapping and smiling, playing the role of proud father. "That's my son," Victor said, following in the footsteps of greatness. "Howard University, baby, the Mecca." I should have noticed something off in his voice, some tremor of guilt or fear. Looking back, I can identify 1,000 moments when I should have seen the truth. But that afternoon, I was too overwhelmed with joy to notice anything except my son's face and the future that was finally within his reach. We had been planning for this moment for years. Since Marcus was 7 years old, Victor and I had been building the college fund, setting aside money from every paycheck, making sacrifices that added up over time. No expensive vacations, no new cars every few years, no designer clothes or luxury purchases. Every spare dollar went into the 529 plan we had opened in Marcus's name, with similar accounts for Maya and Jordan. By my last calculation, we had accumulated approximately $187,000 across the 3 accounts. Enough to cover most of Marcus's education at Howard, with funds remaining for his siblings when their time came. It represented a decade of discipline and delayed gratification, a testament to what a family could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. That evening, after the celebration had wound down and the kids had gone to bed, I sat at my computer to begin the practical work of making Marcus's dream a reality. The first tuition payment would be due in 3 months, and I wanted to ensure everything was in order. I logged into the 529 account management portal with the familiar credentials I had used dozens of times before. The screen loaded, and I felt my heart stop. The account balance showed $342.17. I stared at the number, certain I was seeing things incorrectly. I refreshed the page. The number remained the same. I logged out and logged back in, thinking perhaps there was a system error, some glitch that was displaying incorrect information. But no matter how many times I checked, the balance remained at $342.17. Where was the rest of the money? Where was the $186,000 that should have been there? I clicked on the transaction history, my hands beginning to shake as the page loaded. What I found made me physically ill. For the past 18 months, systematic withdrawals had been draining the account. $5,000 here, $10,000 there, amounts that varied but occurred regularly, usually twice a month. The money had been transferred to an external account, a checking account number I did not recognize. Every withdrawal was authorized by the account's co-owner, Victor. I sat in the darkness of my home office, the glow of the computer screen illuminating a betrayal so vast I could barely comprehend it. My husband had stolen our children's college fund. The money we had saved together, the sacrifices we had made as a family, the future we had promised our son, all of it had been taken. And I had not noticed because I trusted Victor completely, checking the account only occasionally, assuming that our shared commitment meant our shared money was safe. I am a forensic accountant. I spend my professional life tracing hidden money, uncovering financial crimes, following paper trails that criminals believe they have successfully concealed. The irony of being the victim of financial fraud in my own home, by my own husband, was almost too much to process. Almost, but not quite. Because beneath the shock and the grief and the nauseating sense of violation, something else was emerging. The professional part of my mind, the part trained to analyze and investigate and uncover, was already beginning to work. I pulled up the external account number and began tracing it. Within 20 minutes, I had identified the receiving bank and the account holder. The name meant nothing to me at first. Brittany Cole. Who was Brittany Cole, and why had my husband sent her nearly $200,000 of our children's money? I searched the name online and found social media profiles that painted a clear picture. Brittany Cole was 29 years old, an aspiring lifestyle influencer based in Philadelphia. Her Instagram was a curated display of luxury and leisure, designer handbags, expensive restaurants, a new BMW that she had posted about 6 months ago, calling it a gift from someone special. Vacation photos from resorts I recognized as costing thousands of dollars per night. She was beautiful, I noted with clinical detachment. Lighter skinned than me, with long hair and the kind of body that came from either youth or expensive gym memberships. She presented herself as a successful, independent woman living her best life. But the timestamps on her post told a different story. The luxury had begun 18 months ago, exactly when the withdrawals from our college fund had started. This woman was living off my children's future. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly closed the browser windows, my heart pounding. Victor appeared in the doorway of my office, wearing pajamas, looking concerned. "Baby, it's almost midnight. Come to bed." I looked at him, at this man I had been married to for 15 years, and I saw a stranger. The Victor I knew would never betray his family. The Victor I knew had worked overtime and skipped luxuries to build our children's college fund. The Victor I knew loved his children more than anything in the world. That Victor did not exist. Perhaps he never had. "I was just checking Marcus's college fund," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "making sure everything is in order for the first payment." I watched his face carefully, trained by years of professional experience to spot the micro-expressions that indicated deception. There it was, a flicker of panic quickly suppressed, a tightening around his eyes, a slight tension in his jaw. "That's great," he said, his voice too casual. "I'm sure everything is fine. Come to bed. We can deal with all the paperwork tomorrow." "Actually, Victor, I noticed something strange." I turned the monitor toward him, showing the account balance. "Can you explain why there's only $300 in an account that should have nearly $200,000? The color drained from his face. For a long moment, he said nothing, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for words that would not come. I watched him cycle through panic, calculation, and finally a desperate attempt at deflection. "There must be some mistake," he said. "A system error or something. I'll call the bank tomorrow and—" "The transaction history shows regular withdrawals over the past 18 months, all authorized by you, all transferred to an external account in the name of Brittany Cole." I kept my voice steady, professional, the same tone I used when presenting findings to clients whose employees had been embezzling. "Who is Brittany Cole, Victor?" He sat down heavily on the small couch in my office, his head dropping into his hands. The pose of a man who knew he was caught, who had no more room to maneuver, whose carefully constructed lies had finally crumbled. "I can explain," he said weakly. "Then explain." The story came out in fragments, each piece more devastating than the last. He had met Brittany online, on some social media platform where she had been posting about her life, and he had been lurking, looking for something he claimed I no longer provided. Attention, excitement, the feeling of being desired. She had flattered him, made him feel special, convinced him that he deserved more than the stable, predictable life he had built with me. They had been having an affair for 2 years. The financial support had started 18 months ago when Brittany complained about her struggling lifestyle brand and Victor decided to help. A few thousand here, a few thousand there, amounts he convinced himself were manageable. But Brittany's needs grew, and Victor's ability to say no shrank. And before he knew it, he had emptied the account that was supposed to fund his children's education. "I was going to put it back," he said, the most pathetic words I had ever heard. "I've been working on a plan to replenish the fund before Marcus needed it. I never meant for things to go this far. You gave our son's college money to your mistress?" My voice was flat, emotionless, every word precisely chosen. "You stole from your own children to buy luxury items for a woman you met on the internet." I know it sounds bad. It doesn't sound bad, Victor. It is bad. It's theft. It's fraud. It's the betrayal of everything we built together as a family. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face, and for a moment he almost looked like the man I had married. But I knew better now. That man was a performance, a mask he wore to hide the weakness and selfishness beneath. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I thought about Marcus, about the joy on his face when he opened that acceptance letter. I thought about Maya and Jordan, who were counting on those accounts for their own futures. I thought about the decade of sacrifice, the dreams deferred, the family dinners where we talked about Howard and Spelman and Morehouse as if they were promised lands we would definitely reach. "I'm going to find out exactly where every dollar went," I said. "I'm going to document everything. And then I'm going to make sure you and your girlfriend experience the consequences of what you've done." "Denise, please, get out of my office." My voice was ice. "Get out, and don't speak to me again until I tell you to." He left without another word, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I listened to his footsteps recede down the hallway, heard the guest bedroom door open and close, and then I turned back to my computer. I had work to do. I worked through the night, my forensic training taking over as I compiled a comprehensive picture of my husband's betrayal. The transaction records told a story of escalating deception, small withdrawals in the beginning that grew larger and more frequent as Victor's affair deepened and Brittany's demands increased. The first withdrawal had been $3,000, taken 16 months ago. Victor had used it to buy Brittany a designer handbag, which I found documented on her Instagram with the caption, "Grateful for unexpected blessings." The blessings had continued at a steady pace. A new wardrobe, jewelry, trips to Miami and Cancun and the Bahamas. Each expenditure drained a little more of my children's future. By dawn, I had constructed a complete timeline of Victor's theft and infidelity. I had screenshots of every transaction, every incriminating social media post, every piece of evidence that proved what he had done. I had also discovered something that made my blood run cold. Victor had been planning to refinance our house. 3 months ago, he had contacted a mortgage broker about taking out a home equity line of credit. The house was in both our names, which meant he could not do it without my signature. But the emails I found on his computer showed that he had been researching ways around this requirement, consulting with shady operators who claimed they could help him access the equity without my knowledge. He was planning to steal our house too. The man I had married, the father of my children, the partner I had trusted with my life and my family's security, was systematically dismantling everything we had built. And he was doing it for a 29-year-old woman who posted selfies for a living. I closed my laptop and sat in the growing morning light, thinking about what came next. The professional in me knew exactly how to proceed. Document everything, consult an attorney, file for divorce and criminal charges simultaneously to maximize leverage, protect the remaining assets before Victor could steal anything else. But the mother in me wanted something more. I wanted Victor and Brittany to understand what they had done. I wanted them to feel, in their bones, the magnitude of their betrayal. I wanted to destroy them so completely that they would never recover. And I knew exactly how to do it. I picked up my phone and texted my best friend Patricia, an attorney who specialized in family law and fraud cases. "I need to see you today. Emergency, come to my house as soon as you can." Her response came within minutes. "On my way." "What's wrong?" I typed my reply slowly, carefully, letting the words carry the weight of what was about to happen. "Victor stole the kids' college fund for his mistress. I'm going to bury them both." Patricia arrived at my house by 8 o'clock that morning, finding me in my home office surrounded by printed documents and open laptop screens. She was still in her workout clothes, having come directly from her morning run when she received my text. One look at my face told her everything she needed to know about the severity of the situation. "Tell me everything," she said, sitting down across from me. I walked her through the night's discoveries, presenting the evidence with the same methodical precision I used in professional settings. The depleted college fund, the transfers to Brittany Cole, the affair spanning 2 years, the planned refinancing of our home. By the time I finished, Patricia's expression had shifted from concern to controlled fury. "This is fraud," she said flatly. "Multiple forms of fraud. The 529 plan is specifically designated for educational expenses. Using those funds for anything else triggers tax penalties and potentially criminal charges. And if he was planning to forge your signature on refinancing documents, that's forgery and bank fraud." "I know, that's why I called you." I handed her a folder containing the documents I had compiled overnight. "I want to proceed on multiple fronts. Divorce, obviously, but also criminal referral and civil action to recover the funds. I want Victor and his girlfriend to face every possible consequence. Patricia flipped through the documents, her legal mind already assessing the strength of our position. The 529 fraud is clear-cut. We can report this to the IRS and potentially to state authorities. The affair gives us strong grounds for at-fault divorce, which affects asset division in Pennsylvania. And the girlfriend? She paused, thinking. If she knowingly received funds that were obtained fraudulently, she could be liable for receiving stolen property. She knew. I pulled up Brittany's social media on my laptop and showed Patricia the relevant posts. Look at the timing. Every major purchase corresponds to a withdrawal from the college fund. And in some of these captions, she references her benefactor and his investments in her future. She knew exactly where the money was coming from. Over the next several hours, Patricia and I built our case. I used my forensic accounting skills to trace every dollar Victor had stolen, creating a comprehensive financial map that showed the flow of funds from our children's future into Brittany's lifestyle. Patricia identified the legal theories that would support our claims and began drafting the documents we would need. We discovered that Victor's betrayal was even more extensive than I had initially realized. In addition to the college fund theft, he had opened credit cards in his name alone and run up $43,000 in additional debt, all spent on Brittany. Designer clothes, jewelry, a weekend in New York for her birthday. The receipts and statements painted a picture of a man completely intoxicated by his affair, willing to sacrifice everything for a woman who saw him as nothing more than a source of income. I also dug deeper into Brittany Cole's online presence, searching for evidence that she knew Victor was married. I found it in abundance. Private messages between them, accessible through Victor's saved login credentials, showed that she had known about me and the children from the beginning. She's just your roommate situation, right? Brittany had written early in their relationship. Like you said, the marriage is basically over. Exactly, Victor had replied. We're just together for the kids at this point. Once Marcus goes to college, I'm out. And then you and I can start our real life. The messages continued in this vein for months. Victor promising to leave me. Brittany encouraging him to take more money, spend more lavishly, invest more in their future. At one point, she had explicitly asked about the college accounts and whether Victor could redirect some of those funds to help her start a business. I thought you said those were for the kids, Victor had written. Baby, your kids will be fine. They can get scholarships and loans like everyone else. But I need capital now to build something real. And when your divorce is final, we'll have plenty of money to help them later. I stared at that exchange for a long time, feeling something harden inside me. This woman had encouraged my husband to steal from his own children. She had convinced him that our family's sacrifices were less important than her lifestyle brand. She had known exactly what she was doing and had done it anyway. She would pay for that. They both would. I want to do this publicly, I told Patricia. I don't just want a quiet divorce and a settlement agreement. I want everyone to know what they did. Patricia looked at me carefully. That's a risky approach. Public exposure can complicate legal proceedings, and it might make Victor more adversarial in the divorce. Victor doesn't have anything to be adversarial with. The house is in both our names, but I can prove I paid the mortgage almost exclusively from my income. My retirement accounts are protected. The only marital asset of significant value is the house, and I have documentation showing his financial misconduct that will affect how a judge divides things. What about the children? They'll be affected by public exposure too. I thought about Marcus, Maya, and Jordan. They would be hurt by the revelation of their father's betrayal. There was no avoiding that. But they would be hurt regardless, because Victor's actions had consequences that could not be hidden. Better that they learn the truth from me, in a context I controlled, than through rumors and whispers later. My children deserve to know who their father really is, I said. And Victor's family deserves to know who they've been defending all these years. His mother thinks he walks on water. His brothers think he's the perfect husband. They should see the man behind the mask. Patricia nodded slowly. If that's what you want, we can build toward a public revelation. But we need to be strategic about timing. We want all our legal protections in place before Victor knows what's coming. We spent the rest of the day planning. Patricia would prepare the divorce filing, the criminal referral to the IRS, and the civil complaint against Brittany for receiving stolen funds. I would continue documenting Victor's fraud and Brittany's complicity, and we would time everything to culminate at an event that would maximize the impact. Victor's mother's 50th birthday party was 3 weeks away. The entire extended family would be there, friends from church, neighbors who had known Victor since childhood. It was the perfect venue for a revelation that would destroy him completely. "Are you sure about this?" Patricia asked as she gathered her things to leave. "Once you do this, there's no going back. Victor will be publicly humiliated. His relationship with his family may never recover. His career could be destroyed." "Good." My voice was cold, steady, absolutely certain. He destroyed my children's futures without a second thought. He was planning to steal our house and leave us with nothing. He's been lying to me for 2 years while I washed his clothes and cooked his meals and slept next to him every night. I met Patricia's eyes. He doesn't deserve a quiet exit. He deserves to have his world burn down around him while everyone watches. Patricia studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let's make sure it burns completely." After she left, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal. Somewhere in this house, Victor was hiding in the guest bedroom, probably trying to figure out how to minimize the damage, how to spin the situation, how to charm his way out of consequences as he had charmed his way through life. He had no idea what was coming. I thought about Brittany Cole, somewhere across the city, probably waking up in her expensive apartment, checking her Instagram, planning her next luxury purchase with money stolen from my children. She thought she had found a meal ticket, a foolish married man who would fund her lifestyle indefinitely. She had no idea that the wife she had dismissed as an obstacle was about to become her worst nightmare. I opened my laptop and began composing the presentation I would give at Gloria Richardson's 50th birthday party. It would start as a tribute to family and loyalty, to the values Victor's mother had supposedly instilled in her children. And then it would become something else entirely. A burial. A complete and total destruction of 2 people who had stolen from my children. They thought they were clever. They thought they had gotten away with it. They were wrong. The next 3 weeks required a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I moved through my days with apparent normalcy, going to work, cooking dinner, attending to the children's needs, all while knowing that my marriage was a facade and my husband was a thief. Victor seemed to believe that my initial anger had faded, that time and his pathetic attempts at reconciliation were softening my resolve. He tried everything. Flowers delivered to my office, romantic dinner suggestions, tearful apologies delivered in the guest bedroom where he was still sleeping. He promised to get the money back somehow, to make things right, to become the man I had thought I married. Each performance made me hate him more, because I knew it was exactly that, a performance designed to manipulate me into forgiveness. I never let my mask slip. I accepted his flowers with cool politeness. I declined his dinner suggestions with reasonable excuses. I listened to his apologies with an expression of thoughtful consideration that he mistook for weakening resistance. All the while, I was gathering more evidence, strengthening our legal position, and preparing for the moment of his destruction. The children noticed something was wrong, of course. Marcus asked why his father was sleeping in the guest room, and I told him we were having some disagreements that we were working through. Maya, with the perception of a 15-year-old girl, suspected more than she said, watching her father with newly critical eyes. Jordan, at 12, was mostly focused on his video games and basketball practice, though he asked once why everyone seemed so tense. I hated lying to them, even by omission, but they would know the truth soon enough, and I wanted them to hear it in a way that was as controlled as possible. Better a planned revelation than a whispered discovery. Patricia and I met regularly, refining our strategy and ensuring every legal protection was in place. We filed the necessary paperwork to freeze Victor's access to our joint accounts, a motion that was granted quickly given the evidence of his previous theft. I changed the passwords on all our financial platforms and removed his authorization from the children's remaining college funds. Whatever damage he had done, he would not be able to do more. I also did something that surprised even me. I reached out to Brittany Cole. Not directly, but through a fake social media account I created for the purpose. I posed as a potential sponsor for her lifestyle brand, expressing interest in a partnership that could elevate her profile. Brittany responded enthusiastically, sharing details about her life and aspirations that confirmed everything I had already discovered. In our exchanges, she bragged about her supportive partner, who was handling the finances, while she focused on building her brand. She mentioned upcoming plans, trips she was hoping to take, purchases she was anticipating. She was completely confident in her position, certain that Victor's money would continue to flow, unaware that the source had been cut off and the consequences were approaching. One message in particular stood out. When I asked, as my fake sponsor persona, about her long-term goals, Brittany responded with revealing honesty. "I'm actually planning to settle down soon. My partner is going through a divorce, and once that's finalized, we're going to get married and start fresh. He's been so generous with supporting my dreams, and I can't wait to build a real life together." She thought she was going to marry Victor. She thought the divorce was happening on her terms, with her as the beneficiary. She had no idea that the divorce was indeed happening, but not the way she imagined. I saved every message, every revelation, every piece of evidence that showed her knowing participation in Victor's fraud. When the time came, she would have no defense, no claim of innocence, no way to pretend she had been an unwitting recipient of funds she did not know were stolen. The week before Gloria Richardson's birthday party, I sat down with Marcus alone. He was the oldest, the one most directly affected by the theft, and he deserved to know what was coming before it happened publicly. "Marcus, I need to tell you something difficult," I said. "It's about the college fund and about your father." I told him everything, in age-appropriate terms, focusing on the facts rather than the emotional betrayal. His face cycled through shock, disbelief, anger, and finally a profound sadness that broke my heart. He had idolized his father, had seen Victor as a model of what a man should be. Learning the truth shattered something in him that would take years to rebuild. "How could he do that?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with emotion. "That money was for us, for our futures. How could he just give it away to some woman?" "I don't know, baby. I don't understand it either." I took his hands in mine. "But I want you to know that you are still going to Howard. I'm working on financial aid, scholarships, and loans. Your dream is not dead. I will find a way to make it happen. What about Maya and Jordan? I'll find a way for them too. Whatever it takes." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I had told him. Then he looked up, his eyes hardening with something that reminded me of myself. "What are you going to do to him?" "I'm going to make sure he faces the consequences of his actions. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about who he really is." Marcus nodded slowly. "Good, he deserves it." I hugged my son, feeling his body shake with suppressed emotion, and I made a silent promise. Victor had stolen from his children, had betrayed their trust, had prioritized his mistress over their futures. He would pay for that. He would pay in ways he could not yet imagine. The birthday party was in 3 days. The presentation was ready. The legal documents were prepared. Every piece was in place. It was almost time. The morning of Gloria Richardson's 50th birthday party, I woke before dawn and lay in bed, mentally rehearsing what was about to happen. In 12 hours, my marriage would be publicly over. In 12 hours, Victor would face the consequences of his choices in front of everyone who mattered to him. In 12 hours, the life we had built together would be reduced to rubble. I felt no regret, only resolve. Victor was already up, moving around the guest bedroom where he had been sleeping for the past month. He thought today was a celebration, a chance to reconnect with family and demonstrate his devotion to his mother. He had no idea that I had been in contact with Patricia all week, finalizing the documents, coordinating the timing, ensuring that every element of our plan was in place. The party was scheduled for 3 o'clock at a banquet hall in Germantown, a venue Gloria had chosen for its elegance and capacity. More than 100 guests were expected, including Victor's parents, his 2 brothers and their families, aunts and uncles from both sides, friends from church, neighbors, colleagues. Everyone who had ever mattered to the Richardson family would be present. I had volunteered to handle the slideshow presentation, a tribute to family that would be projected during the celebration. Gloria had been touched by my offer, praising me to Victor as the perfect daughter-in-law. Little did she know that her perfect daughter-in-law was about to destroy her favorite son. The children knew something significant was happening, though I had not told Maya and Jordan the full details. Marcus understood everything and had agreed to support his siblings through what was coming. He was angry at his father, a righteous anger that I recognized because I shared it, but he was also old enough to understand the complexity of what our family was facing. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Maya asked as I helped her get ready for the party. "You've been acting weird for weeks. Is something wrong with you and Dad?" I looked at my daughter, at her worried eyes and her careful question, and I made a decision. She deserved some warning, some preparation for the storm that was coming. "Yes, something is wrong. Your father did something very bad, something that hurt our whole family. And today everyone is going to find out about it." Maya's face went pale. "Is he having an affair?" The directness of her question surprised me. "Yes, how did you know?" "I'm 15, Mom. I've seen how you look at him lately. And I found some messages on his phone a few weeks ago, before you took away his access to everything." She looked down at her hands. I was hoping I was wrong. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her body tremble against mine. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I'm sorry any of this is happening. But I need you to be strong today, for yourself and for Jordan. Can you do that?" "Yes." Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. "I hate him, Mom. I hate what he did to you." "You don't have to hate him. He's still your father. But you should know the truth about who he is." We finished getting ready in silence, each of us processing the weight of what was coming. Jordan, oblivious to the undercurrents, chattered excitedly about the cake and the party games his grandmother had planned. I let him have his innocence for a few more hours. It would be stripped away soon enough. The drive to the banquet hall was surreal. Victor sat in the passenger seat, making small talk about the party, commenting on the weather, behaving as if everything was normal. I responded with appropriate noises, keeping my eyes on the road, counting down the minutes until his performance would end permanently. We arrived to find the hall already filling with guests. Gloria greeted us at the door, resplendent in a purple dress, her face glowing with happiness. She hugged Victor with the fierce possessiveness of a mother who believed her son was perfect, then hugged me with equal warmth. "Thank you for the beautiful slideshow, Denise. I saw the preview and I was in tears. This family is so blessed to have you." I smiled and accepted her gratitude, feeling a twinge of guilt that I quickly suppressed. Gloria had always been kind to me, had welcomed me into the family with genuine warmth, but she had also raised a man who thought nothing of stealing from his own children, of lying to his wife for years, of prioritizing his mistress over his family. Whatever pain she was about to experience was the fruit of her son's choices, not mine. The party proceeded normally for the first 2 hours. Guests mingled, food was served, toasts were given. Victor worked the room with his customary charm, playing the role of devoted son and loving husband. I watched him from across the hall, marveling at his ability to maintain the facade, wondering if he felt any anxiety about the exposure he had been dreading for weeks. At 5 o'clock, Gloria called everyone to attention for the slideshow presentation. Guests gathered around the projection screen, champagne glasses in hand, ready to celebrate the family's history and matriarch. I made my way to the laptop that controlled the presentation, my heart pounding but my hands steady. Patricia had positioned herself near the back of the room, ready with the legal documents. A police officer she knew from her practice was outside in an unmarked car on standby in case Victor reacted badly to what was coming. Everything was in place. I began the slideshow with the innocuous content Gloria expected. Baby pictures of her children, wedding photos, graduations and birthdays and family vacations. Our children would have been left with nothing. The room had descended into chaos. People were shouting, crying, demanding explanations. Gloria had collapsed into a chair, her sisters fanning her face and calling for water. Victor's brothers had surrounded him, their expressions torn between disbelief and rage. "Denise, please stop this," Victor begged, trying to push through the crowd toward me. "This isn't what it looks like. I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Victor. The evidence speaks for itself." I signaled to Patricia, who stepped forward with a manila envelope. You're being served with divorce papers and a criminal complaint for fraud. The IRS has already been notified about your misuse of 529 funds, and a civil case has been filed against your girlfriend for receiving stolen property. Victor took the envelope with trembling hands, his face ashen. You can't do this. After everything we've been through, you can't just... I can. I have. And there's one more thing. I advanced to the final slide, which showed screenshots of messages where Victor complained about his family to Brittany. Your mother might be interested in what you really think of her. The messages appeared on screen. Victor calling Gloria controlling and exhausting. Victor saying he could not wait to get away from that woman and her constant guilt trips. Victor joking that his father was basically useless and that he was embarrassed to share his last name. Gloria made a sound that was almost inhuman, a wail of pain and betrayal that cut through the chaos. Victor turned to her, reaching out, but she recoiled from him as if his touch were poison. Mom, I didn't mean, those were just, I was venting, Get away from me. Gloria's voice was barely a whisper. Get away from me and don't ever speak to me again. I closed the laptop and stepped back from the presentation area. The room was in complete disarray. The celebration transformed into a wake for a family that had just learned its golden son was rotten to the core. Victor stood alone in a circle of rejection, his wife filing for divorce, his mother refusing to look at him, his brothers advancing with expressions that promised consequences. Patricia appeared at my side, her hand on my elbow. We should go. The children are with my assistant in the car. Security is watching Victor in case he tries anything. I nodded and allowed her to lead me through the crowd, past the sobbing relatives and the horrified guests, past the birthday cake that would never be cut and the champagne that would never be drunk in celebration. Behind me, I could hear Victor calling my name, begging me to listen, to give him another chance, to understand. I did not look back. The drive home was quiet. The children sat in the back of Patricia's car, Marcus with his arms around his younger siblings, all of them processing what they had witnessed. Jordan was crying softly, too young to fully understand, but old enough to know that something terrible had happened. Maya stared out the window, her expression blank, retreating into herself in the way she always did when emotions became overwhelming. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the Philadelphia streets pass by, feeling strangely empty. The anger that had sustained me for weeks had burned itself out in that banquet hall, leaving behind a hollow space that would eventually fill with grief and healing. But for now, there was only silence. You did what you had to do, Patricia said quietly, not taking her eyes off the road. Victor made his choices. The consequences were inevitable. I know. My voice sounded distant, detached. I just wish the kids didn't have to see it like that. They would have found out eventually. Better from you in a controlled situation than through gossip or accidental discovery. She was right, I knew. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different things. My children had watched their family explode in public, had seen their father exposed as a thief and a liar, had witnessed their grandmother collapse in shock. Those images would stay with them forever. When we arrived home, I sent the children to their rooms with promises that we would talk more tomorrow, once everyone had time to process. Marcus lingered at the bottom of the stairs, looking at me with eyes that held too much understanding for a 17-year-old. You okay, Mom? I will be. I hugged him, feeling his strength and his support. We all will be. This is hard, but we'll get through it together. He nodded and went upstairs, and I was finally alone. Patricia had left with promises to call in the morning, once we knew how Victor was reacting and what legal steps needed to be taken next. The house was quiet, the same house I had shared with Victor for 15 years, now feeling simultaneously familiar and foreign. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the darkness of my living room, thinking about what came next. The divorce proceedings, the criminal case against Victor, the civil case against Brittany, the long work of rebuilding my children's college funds and my own sense of trust. It would be hard. It would take years. But I had done the hardest part already. I had faced the truth and acted on it. I had protected my children and exposed the man who had betrayed us all. Victor Richardson was buried. Not in the ground, but in the grave of his own making, a grave dug by lies and filled with the dirt of exposed truth. And Brittany Cole would soon join him. The weeks following the birthday party were a cascade of consequences, each one burying Victor and Brittany deeper beneath the weight of their choices. I watched it unfold with a satisfaction that I tried not to examine too closely, preferring to frame it as justice rather than revenge. Victor's professional life collapsed first. His employer, a mid-sized IT consulting firm, conducted a routine background check update and discovered the criminal complaint filed against him. Within a week of the birthday party, he was terminated, his reputation in the industry destroyed by whispered stories that spread through professional networks like wildfire. A man who stole from his own children's college fund was not someone any company wanted associated with their brand. He tried to fight it, of course. He called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that alternated between pathetic pleading and angry threats. He accused me of ruining his life, of taking things too far, of being vindictive rather than reasonable. I saved every message as potential evidence, but I never responded. There was nothing left to say. The criminal case proceeded more slowly, but just as inexorably. The IRS took the misuse of 529 funds seriously, launching an investigation that expanded beyond my initial complaint. Victor had apparently been sloppy in his tax filings, claiming deductions he was not entitled to, failing to report certain income. The investigators found irregularities going back years, each one adding to the legal pressure he faced. Patricia kept me informed of every development, translating legal jargon into plain English, helping me understand what each step meant for our family's future. The divorce itself was straightforward. Victor had no grounds to contest anything, no assets to claim, no leverage of any kind. The house would remain mine. The children would remain with me. Whatever remained of our marital assets would be divided according to a formula that heavily favored the wronged spouse. He's going to have to pay restitution for the stolen funds, Patricia explained during one of our meetings, plus child support based on his pre-termination income. He'll be paying off this mistake for years, maybe decades. Good. My voice was flat, emotionless. He should feel the weight of what he did every single month when that payment comes due. Brittany Cole's destruction was equally comprehensive. The civil case against her for receiving stolen funds was only the beginning. The IRS, alerted to her receipt of nearly $200,000 in unreported gifts, launched their own investigation into her finances. Her carefully curated lifestyle, it turned out, had been built on tax evasion and unreported income. Her social media presence, once her source of income and validation, became her downfall. The story of the stolen college fund went viral locally after a journalist friend of Patricia's wrote about it for a Philadelphia news outlet. Brittany's followers discovered that the luxury she had been flaunting was funded by a married man's theft from his own children. The backlash was swift and brutal. Her sponsors dropped her within days. Her follower count plummeted. Her carefully constructed image as a successful independent woman was revealed as a facade built on exploitation and greed. She tried to rebrand, to claim she had not known where the money was coming from, but the messages I had documented showed otherwise. She had known, she had encouraged it, and now she was paying the price. I tracked her decline through social media updates that grew increasingly desperate. She had to give up her apartment, could no longer afford the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The BMW was repossessed. The designer wardrobe was sold on consignment. Within 3 months of the birthday party, Brittany Cole had disappeared from social media entirely, retreating into an obscurity that felt like justice. Victor's family, meanwhile, struggled to process what had happened. His mother, Gloria, refused to speak to him, a rejection that seemed to wound him more than any legal consequence. His brothers maintained minimal contact, their relationship strained by the revelation of his true character. The extended family that had once celebrated him as a success story now treated him as an embarrassment to be avoided. He eventually moved in with his parents, having nowhere else to go. The man who had once prided himself on his comfortable lifestyle, who had spent nearly $200,000 impressing his mistress, was now living in his childhood bedroom at 44 years old. It was a humiliation beyond anything I could have engineered, and I felt no sympathy whatsoever. The children processed their father's fall in different ways. Marcus channeled his anger into determination, throwing himself into his preparations for Howard University with renewed intensity. We had pieced together a financial aid package that would make his attendance possible, a combination of scholarships, grants, and loans that represented a different kind of sacrifice, but ultimately the same goal. He would get his education. Victor's theft had not stolen that from him. Maya struggled more visibly, her trust in the world shaken by her father's betrayal. She started seeing a therapist, working through feelings of abandonment and disillusionment. The process was slow and painful, but I could see her growing stronger, learning to separate her own worth from her father's failures. Jordan, at 12, was the most resilient and the most confused. He missed his father, still harbored hope that things could somehow return to normal, and could not fully understand why the adults had made such a mess of everything. I tried to shield him as much as possible while still being honest, a balance that required constant adjustment. Victor tried to maintain contact with the children, calling and texting with a persistence that bordered on harassment. The kids were reluctant to engage, their trust destroyed by his actions, but I did not prevent communication entirely. They needed to work out their own relationships with their father, however damaged those relationships might be. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the birthday party. I sat in the courthouse with Patricia at my side, watching Victor sign the documents that ended our 15-year marriage. He looked diminished, smaller than I remembered, his clothes hanging loosely on a frame that had lost weight from stress. The arrogant man who had stolen from his children and bragged to his mistress was gone, replaced by a broken figure who could not meet my eyes. "I'm sorry," he said as he signed the final paper. "I know it doesn't matter now, but I'm sorry for everything." I looked at him, this stranger who had once been my husband, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even grief. Just emptiness where love had once been. "Sorry doesn't give my children their college fund back," I said. "Sorry doesn't undo the years of lies. Sorry doesn't rebuild the trust you destroyed." I stood up, gathering my copies of the documents. "But you're right about one thing. It doesn't matter now. Nothing you say or do matters to me anymore." I walked out of the courthouse and into the spring sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight of the marriage, the weight of Victor's betrayal, the weight of the months-long campaign to bring him to justice, all of it fell away as I stepped through those doors. Behind me was the wreckage of the life I had built with a man who did not deserve it. Ahead of me was a future I would build on my own terms. Patricia met me on the courthouse steps, her face breaking into a rare smile. "It's done. You're officially a single woman again. How does it feel?" I thought about the question, searching for an honest answer. It feels like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. It feels like freedom. We walked to her car and she drove me home, where my children were waiting. They had taken the day off from school to be there when I returned, to celebrate in their own way the end of a chapter that had caused so much pain. When I walked through the door, Maya hugged me with a fierceness that brought tears to my eyes. Jordan smiled tentatively, still uncertain but relieved. And Marcus stood back, nodding with an adult understanding that made me proud and sad in equal measure. "It's over," I told them. "We can start healing now." But it was not quite over. There was one more piece of the puzzle, one final act of closure that would come 6 months later when the criminal case against Victor reached its conclusion. The criminal sentencing hearing took place on a gray November morning, almost exactly 1 year after I had discovered the empty college fund. Victor stood before the judge in a wrinkled suit that had once fit him better, his attorney beside him making half-hearted arguments for leniency. The courtroom was nearly empty, just Patricia and me in the gallery, along with a few legal observers who found fraud cases interesting. The judge reviewed the facts with methodical precision. The theft of $187,000 from a 529 educational savings account. The tax evasion associated with improper use of tax-advantaged funds. The pattern of deception and financial misconduct spanning nearly 2 years. Victor's attorney argued that his client had already suffered significant consequences, that he had lost his job, his family, his reputation, and that additional punishment would be excessive. The prosecutor countered with the impact statement I had provided. describing how Victor's theft had affected our children's futures, the stress and trauma it had caused our family, the violation of trust that could never be repaired. She asked for meaningful consequences, something that would demonstrate that stealing from your own children was not a victimless crime. The judge took several minutes to consider before delivering her ruling. Victor was sentenced to 18 months of probation, during which he would be required to make full restitution of the stolen funds. Failure to make payments would result in incarceration. He was also required to complete community service focused on financial literacy education, teaching others about the consequences of financial fraud. It was not as harsh as I had hoped, but it was enough. Victor would spend the next several years paying back every dollar he had stolen, a monthly reminder of his betrayal. His criminal record would follow him for the rest of his life, making employment difficult and trust impossible. He was not going to prison, but he was living in a prison of his own making. After the hearing, I walked to my car alone. Patricia had left earlier for another appointment, and I had wanted to stay for the full sentencing. The air was cold, winter approaching, the sky heavy with clouds that promised snow. I sat in the driver's seat and thought about the year that had passed. I had buried them, Victor and Brittany, both reduced to shadows of who they had been. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with the simple and devastating power of truth. I had documented their crimes, exposed their deceptions, and let the consequences unfold naturally. They had destroyed themselves. I had simply made sure everyone knew about it. The satisfaction I felt was not joy, not celebration. It was something quieter and more profound, a sense of completion, of justice served, of wrongs acknowledged even if they could never be fully righted. My children's college fund was still depleted, but we had found ways forward. My trust was still broken, but it was slowly rebuilding. My family was smaller now, but it was stronger. I started the car and drove toward home, toward the children who were waiting for me, toward the life I was building from the ashes of my marriage. Victor was behind me now, a closed chapter, a cautionary tale. Brittany had vanished into obscurity, her lifestyle brand destroyed, her dreams of marriage to a wealthy man exposed as the delusion they always were. And I was still standing, still fighting, still moving forward. That was the real victory. Not the destruction of my enemies, but my own survival. My own resilience, my own refusal to be broken by people who did not deserve the power to break me. I pulled into my driveway and saw the lights on in the windows, my children visible through the curtains, going about their evening routines. This was my home, my family, my future. I had buried the past. Now it was time to build something new. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the audience at Howard University's freshman convocation, watching my son Marcus take his place among a new class of students. The auditorium was filled with proud parents and nervous freshmen, the air electric with possibility and new beginnings. I had tears streaming down my face, and I did not care who saw them. Against all odds, against the theft that had nearly destroyed his dream, Marcus was here. We had pieced together a financial package that included scholarships, grants, work study, and yes, some loans that he would have to repay after graduation. It was not the fully funded education I had planned and saved for, but it was real, it was happening, and my son was going to become a Howard man. Maya sat beside me, holding my hand, her own eyes wet with emotion. At 16 now, she had grown into a young woman of remarkable strength and resilience. The therapy had helped, as had time and distance from her father's betrayal. She was thriving in school, had joined the debate team, was already thinking about her own college applications. Her path forward was different from what we had planned, but it was still bright with possibility. Jordan was on my other side, now 13 and increasingly mature. He maintained some contact with Victor, occasional phone calls and rare visits that I did not discourage. His relationship with his father was complicated, a mixture of love and disappointment that would take years to fully sort out. But he understood now what had happened, understood why our family had changed, and he had chosen to stand with his mother and siblings. After the convocation, we took Marcus to his dormitory and helped him settle into his room. His roommate was a young man from Baltimore named Kevin. and they had already discovered a shared interest in computer science and hip-hop. The room was small but full of potential, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with memories and growth. When it was time to leave, Marcus walked us to the car, his demeanor a careful balance of excitement and anxiety. He hugged his siblings first, promising to text them every day, warning Jordan not to touch his video games while he was gone. Then he turned to me, and for a moment, we just looked at each other, mother and son, bound by a love that had survived the worst betrayal imaginable. "Thank you, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For fighting for me when Dad was trying to take away my future. For not giving up even when everything seemed impossible. You never have to thank me for that." I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight, memorizing the feel of his arms around me. "You're my son. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you." "I know." He pulled back and looked at me with eyes that held wisdom beyond his years. "I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to graduate, get a good job, and repay every loan. And I'm going to show Dad that his attempt to destroy us only made us stronger. You've already made me proud, every single day." We drove home through the autumn afternoon, the car quieter without Marcus's presence, the reality of his absence settling over us. Maya put on music and stared out the window. Jordan played a game on his phone. I focused on the road and thought about how far we had come. Victor was still out there somewhere, working menial jobs to make his restitution payments, living with his parents, slowly paying off the debt of his betrayal. I heard occasional updates from mutual acquaintances, none of them positive. His career was over. His reputation was destroyed. His family had largely abandoned him. He was, in every meaningful sense, buried. Brittany Cole had disappeared entirely from public view. Her social media accounts were deleted. Her influencer career was finished. The IRS investigation had resulted in significant penalties and back taxes that she would be paying for years. Whatever dreams she had harbored of marrying Victor and living a life of luxury were as dead as Victor's reputation. I had done what I set out to do. I had protected my children. I had exposed the truth. I had ensured that the people who had stolen from my family faced the consequences of their actions. And I had emerged on the other side stronger than I had ever been. My career had flourished in the year since the divorce. My firm had promoted me to partner, recognizing the value of a forensic accountant who understood betrayal and deception at such a personal level. I had used my experience to help other families facing similar situations, turning my pain into purpose. The house that Victor had wanted to steal was now fully mine, refinanced in my name alone, protected from any future claim. I had renovated the kitchen, repainted the bedrooms, made changes that marked the space as mine and my children's, rather than the family home we had once shared. It was smaller now, in some ways, with Marcus gone and the children growing toward their own departures. But it was also more peaceful, more authentically ours. I thought about the woman I had been before all of this happened. Trusting, naive, certain that my husband loved me and would never hurt our family. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder, wiser, more careful about who she allowed into her life. I missed her sometimes, that innocent version of myself, but I was proud of who I had become. That evening, after the long drive home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching the sunset over the Philadelphia skyline. Maya and Jordan were inside doing homework, their voices carrying through the open windows, the sounds of normal life continuing despite everything we had been through. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Made it to dinner. Cafeteria food is terrible, but I'm starving, so it doesn't matter. Love you, Mom. Thanks for everything." I smiled and typed my response. "Love you too. Eat your vegetables. Study hard. Call me tomorrow." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about Victor, about Brittany, about the wreckage I had left in my wake. I had buried them both, not with dirt, but with truth. I had destroyed their lives not with violence, but with consequences. And I had emerged from the ashes of my marriage to build something better for myself and my children. Some people might have called it revenge. Others might have called it justice. But I knew what it really was. It was survival, It was protection. It was a mother's love transformed into a weapon against anyone who dared threaten her children. Victor had stolen from us. Brittany had encouraged him, and I had buried them both so deep in the consequences of their choices that they would never fully climb out. The night settled around me, peaceful and dark. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang, marking the hour. I finished my wine, stood up, and went inside to join my children. The past was buried, the future was waiting, and I was ready for whatever came next. 3 months after Marcus started at Howard, I received a phone call that brought unexpected closure. Victor had been arrested for violating the terms of his probation, having missed several restitution payments and failed to complete his required community service hours. He was facing the possibility of actual incarceration now, the prison time that had been suspended in his original sentencing. His attorney contacted Patricia, asking if I would be willing to speak on Victor's behalf at the hearing, perhaps asking for leniency given our history together. The request was audacious, a testament to Victor's desperate circumstances, and I declined without hesitation. He made his choices, I told Patricia. He continued making those choices even after facing consequences. I'm not responsible for saving him from himself. Victor was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, a fate that brought me no joy but also no sorrow. It was simply the next step in the logical progression of his downfall, another consequence of decisions he had made freely and consistently. He would serve his time, emerge with an even more damaged record, and continue the slow process of paying back what he had stolen. I did not attend the sentencing hearing. I had moved beyond the need to witness his destruction firsthand. The updates I received from Patricia were enough to confirm that the burial was complete. Victor Richardson was underground now, in every metaphorical sense that mattered. Brittany Cole resurfaced briefly around the same time, attempting to rebuild her online presence under a new name and brand. But the internet has a long memory, and her past was quickly uncovered and recirculated. Her attempt at reinvention lasted less than a month before she retreated again into obscurity. The last I heard, she had moved to another state, trying to start over somewhere her history was not known. They were both ghosts now, haunting the margins of the lives they had once enjoyed. And I was more alive than I had ever been. My 50th birthday arrived in December, exactly 2 years after I had discovered the empty college fund. Patricia organized a surprise party at a restaurant downtown, filling the room with friends and colleagues and family members who had supported me through the darkest period of my life. All 3 of my children were there, Marcus flying home from Howard for the weekend, Maya and Jordan helping with the decorations and the cake. The celebration was everything I could have wanted. Laughter and love and the warmth of people who genuinely cared about me. There were no shadows in the room, no ghosts of betrayal or loss. Just the present moment and the people who mattered. Marcus made a toast that brought tears to my eyes. He spoke about resilience, about strength, about a mother who had refused to let her children's dreams die even when their father had tried to steal them. He spoke about Howard, about his classes and his friends and the future he was building. And he spoke about gratitude, about the debt he owed not in money, but in love and determination to make good on the investment his mother had made in him. To the strongest woman I know, he concluded, raising his glass. To my mom, thank you for never giving up on us. The room raised their glasses in response, and I sat there surrounded by love, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The betrayal that had seemed like the end of everything had become the beginning of something better. The destruction of my marriage had created space for a life I had not known I wanted. The burial of Victor and Brittany had been the groundwork for my own resurrection. I looked around the room at the faces of people I loved. My children growing into remarkable adults. Patricia, the friend who had stood beside me through every legal battle. Colleagues who respected my work and celebrated my success. Family members who had supported me without judgment. This was my life now, built on the ashes of what had been destroyed, stronger for having survived the fire. After the party, after the guests had gone home and the restaurant had closed, I sat alone in my car in the parking lot, savoring the quiet. The night was cold but clear, stars visible above the city lights. I thought about everything I had been through and everything that lay ahead. Victor was in jail, Brittany had vanished, my children were thriving, my career was flourishing, and I was at peace, perhaps for the first time in years. I had buried them both. Not with malice, but with truth. Not with violence, but with consequences. And in doing so, I had freed myself from the weight of their betrayal. The rearview mirror reflected the restaurant behind me, dark now, the celebration over. I adjusted the mirror and looked at my own face, seeing someone I was finally proud to be. I started the car and drove home, toward the life I had built from nothing, toward the future I had fought for and won. The graves I had dug were deep. The truth I had exposed was permanent, and I was standing in the sunlight, alive and whole and ready for whatever came next. My name is Denise Richardson. I am a forensic accountant, a mother of 3, and a survivor. And I buried them both.